أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي Selamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So inshallah we will continue with the 23rd point.
Okay, one comment on the first point, the last paragraph. I was rereading that. It's very interesting. How the angels are obedient and submissive to the person of Adam, as the author is mentioning, like that event, that minor event that was the prostration. But that is pretty much like you were saying, it highlights a universal principle, and that it makes it really, really strong that at the disposal of man, all the angels are available. They are obedient and submissive to man himself. And it is very important how man makes use of his choice or his free will in terms of who to employ, either the angels or the Satans, right? So, I mean, I don't know I don't recall that we may have discussed this, but when in that paragraph it says the Quran makes understood that most of the physical beings in the universe and their non-physical representatives and appointed beings are subjugated to man. So that I thought was a pretty significant sentence, that man's non-physical representatives and appointed beings are subjugated to man. So what is it that is subjugated to man in terms of these representatives that we are using? And that man's senses are predisposed and amenable to benefiting from all of them. Yeah, so just wanted to highlight how, the importance of although the topic was about the minor event, and then how that highlights the universal principle, but it brings into light also the how the free will of man, and the fact that that event also tells me that introduces me to the angelic side of everything, the non-physical representatives, and how man can interact or be get the meaning, how man can interact with that non-physical representatives and establish that relationship also with them. So that was one comment. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair, that was a very fine point. I guess, regardless how much we try, we won't be able to give the right of free will in our discussions. Especially in our, I guess, modern times, the value of free will is somehow underestimated, or let's say undervalued. Underrated, yes. In this age of science, or age of, I don't know how you would prefer to call it, it's as if we trying to fool ourselves that through using some human faculties like rationality, we will go beyond human, somehow discard our free will and reach a description of the universe, description of the reality which is independent of human mind. I was just listening a guy talking about this scientific method together with Yusuf. It's really hard to understand when people try to describe what science is, and you ask yourself why people trying to convince themselves that what we do in science is trying to reach a description which is independent of us. independent of free will, human choice. But as Asim was saying, I guess, whatever we do, at the end it boils down to your free will. It's nothing more. You make a choice there, and that's all. That's the only value of any action, I guess. You make a choice.
Okay. Third point. And yet, after all this, your hearts hardened and became like rocks, or even harder. For behold, there are rocks from which streams gush forth, and behold, there are some from which, when they are cleft, water issues. And there are some that fall down for awe of God, and God is not unmindful of what you do. While reading the above verse, the whisperer said, "What meaning is there in discussing and explaining as though they were the most important and significant of matters, certain natural states of rocks, which are commonplace and everyone knows about? How is it fitting, and what need is there?" In the face of this suggestion, the following point was imparted to me from the effulgence of the Quran. Yes, it is fitting, and there is need for it, and it is so fitting, and there is a meaning so significant, and truth so enormous and necessary that only through the Quran's miraculous conciseness and guiding grace has it been simplified to a degree and summarized. Yes, conciseness, one foundation of the Quran's miraculousness, and guiding grace and fitting instruction, which are one light of its guidance, require that in the face of ordinary people who form the majority of those whom the Quran addresses, universal truths and profound and general principles are shown in familiar and particular forms, and that, due to their simple minds, only the tips of vast truths are shown and in a simple form, and, moreover, that the divine disposals, which are wondrous and extraordinary beneath the veil of the commonplace and under the earth, are shown briefly. Thus, it is due to this mystery that the all-wise Quran says the following with the above verse: "O children of Israel and sons of Adam, what has happened to you that your hearts have become harder and more lifeless than stone? For do you not see that those extremely hard, lifeless, huge rocks formed in vast strata under the earth are so obedient and subjugated before the divine commands, and so soft and tractable under the dominical works, that to whatever degree the divine disposals occur without resistance in the formation of trees in the air, orderly water channels and veins, like the circulation of blood in veins, occur with the same ease and order and with perfect wisdom in those hard, deaf rocks under the earth. And like the way the branches of trees and plants spread in the air, with ease encountering no obstacles, the delicate veins of roots spread with the same ease in the rocks under the earth. The Quran indicates this and teaches an extensive truth with the verse, and thus by allusion says the following to the hard-hearted: "O children of Israel and sons of Adam, what sort of heart do you bear within your weakness and impotence, so that with its hardness it resists the command of such a one? Whereas, how perfectly and obediently the huge strata of hard rocks carry out their delicate duties in the darkness before his commands. They display no disobedience. Indeed, those rocks act as treasurers for the water of life and other means of life of all the living creatures above the earth, and are the means for their division and distribution. They do this with such wisdom and justice that they are soft like wax or air in the hand of power of the all-wise one of glory. Offering no resistance, they prostrate before his mighty power. For just like well-ordered creatures and wise and gracious divine disposals occur on top of the earth, which we observe, the same occur beneath it. Indeed, divine wisdom and favor are manifest there in a more wondrous and strange way in regard to wisdom and order. See how like wax those hard, unfeeling, mighty rocks display a softness towards the creational commands, and how they offer no resistance or hardness to the delicate waters, the fine roots, and silken veins, which are divine officials. As though, like a lover, the rock's heart melts at the touch of those delicate, beautiful things, and becomes earth in their path, and behold, there are some that fall down for awe of God. The Quran shows the tip of a vast truth, which is like this. Like in the event of Moses asking for the vision of God, and the famous mountain crumbling at the divine manifestation, and the rocks being scattered through the manifestations of divine glory in the form of earthquakes and the mountains shaking, most of which are like great monoliths formed of solidified liquid, and certain other geological occurrences. Through such awesome manifestations of glory, the rocks fall from the high summits of the mountains and are broken up. Some of these crumble Some of these crumble and being transformed into earth become like the source of plants. Others remain as rocks and rolling down to the valleys and plains are scattered. They serve many purposes in the works of the earth's inhabitants, by being utilized in their houses, for example, and prostrating in submission before divine wisdom and power for certain hidden instances of wisdom and benefits. They take on the form of being at the command of the principles of divine wisdom. The evidence that they are leaving their high places out of awe, choosing lower places in humble fashion, and being the means of those significant benefits, and that they are neither futile nor acting of their own accord, nor are objects of chance, but that within the disorder, through the wise disposals of one all-wise and all-powerful, they are within a wise order not apparent to the superficial eye. The evidence for this are the purposes and benefits attached to the rocks, and the perfect order and fine art of the shirts adorned and embossed with the jewels of fruits and flowers with which the body of the mountains down which they roll are clothed. These testify in a decisive fashion which cannot be doubted.
Before we start discussing, there's one part I just don't want to lose the heat. So let me mention right now. When he says these rocks coming down from the mountains and becoming a source of plants. Like I was reading together with Dr. Rahman, and then I don't know, like out of nothing, it's just, I guess, comes automatically that I ask, like, what a wonderful design. Like the rocks coming and serving to plants, being source of the plants, all these minerals and whatever. Rocks, like coming from mountain and then turning into plants. This is so, I don't know, like we don't even most of the time realize this amazing design, but when somebody puts it into your eyes by, as a part of the text, I don't know, like my heart, when I was reading this part, like your heart start, pumping hard. It's so exciting. The rocks coming down and becoming the source of plants, like giving life. From rocks to life. I don't know, this is like, it makes you speechless. I know I'm speaking, but this is, I don't know, so amazing. It gives you security. Like, this is my Lord. From rocks to life. And what else you would want? Like, what kind of Lord you would want? He can give me anything. Like, no doubt, no question. He gives life from rocks.
There's this legend of Ferhat and Shirin. In that story, Shirin is this beautiful girl, but Shirin's elder sister doesn't allow for the marriage. And Ferhat is asked to dig a hole in the mountain to bring water from behind the mountain. So, as if it's something legendary to break the mountain and bring water from behind the mountain. And this is a legendary love story. And a man does this for the love of the woman. So in here, the way Nursi is putting it is as if the stones are crumbling and coming down. There's this sort of as if love relation between the plants and the stones and everything. But for us, they are just like unconscious beings, and this is a natural phenomenon that's happening.
Okay, let's start from the beginning, inshallah. So as far as I remember, we studied a few paragraphs, but it doesn't mean that we cannot revisit them. It's been a while. So first, let me read the verse again, just to remind. And yet, after all these, your hearts hardened and become like rocks, or even harder. For behold, there are rocks from which the streams gush forth. And behold, there are some from which, when they are cleft, water issues. and there are some that fall down for awe of God. And God is not unmindful of what you do. The ending part is so interesting. And God is not unmindful of what you do. Nursi, I guess, explains it very delicately, talking about all the order, purpose, with everything about the rocks, and reminding us that whatever happens with the rocks, even with the rocks, it's under control of our Lord, under the control of the Creator. I guess here he's saying that the Creator says, while this is the case, do you think you are not, under my control or under my eyes?
It seems like the common theme is the submission of the other beings in the creation. In this specific example, it is the rocks, that they submit to the will of God, and they submit to His will and power.
They don't have other choice not to submit, though. That's the part that I don't understand.
So then, like, the question is, like on the surface level, it seems like there is this submission is like kind of the main theme. And the question is, but at the same time, like, we are talking about like inanimate beings that doesn't have life, that doesn't have will, right? So, but at the same time, this is an example for a human being who is conscious and also has will. And through the rock example, actually speaking to man, like, look at yourself, your own heart, to see which one is more lifeless, if you like. Is it the stones that are more lifeless, or it is your heart that is just so, how do you say, it's so dark, or that is not enlightened, that it is almost like as lifeless or as inanimate as the rocks. And of course there, like, then Birkan was talking about earlier, referring to the free will, man's free will is like at play too. And how does that also relate, like, that dynamics works with the absolute will of the Creator, and what's your submission to the absolute will, or how is your submission to the absolute will? Do you really think like whatever that is going through in your heart is actually out of his, what was the word?
Unmindful.
That he is not aware of, like, the state of the heart that you have, like, in terms of like your relationship with him?
So it started with the question, why in Quran the states of rocks are being narrated. That was the question, what is the point? The questioner was saying, like, everybody knows about rocks. Like, yes, we know that when they are cleft, water issues, and even we use this in our, let's say, engineering designs. And I guess in the same logic, in the same, how would you say, following the same logic, one may say, we even know much more than this. Like, we even know how to utilize rocks in a ways that the people wouldn't even be able to imagine 14 years ago, 1400 years ago. So why you are talking about this basic stuff? That was the question. And then with the first part of the answer, which is kind of, I guess, the introduction, giving us a baseline or a background, establishing a background for our future and further understanding. It was, the author was alluding the guidance nature of Quran, was saying, I guess, the one way of reading this paragraph, which starts with, yes, it is fitting and there is need for it, is that your question shows that you don't understand the purpose of Quran. You don't understand why Quran is there. And the answer was, the Quran is there to give you a guidance. It's not there to explain you rocks, or it's not there to tell you about how rocks behave or their states or whatever. Or it's there to give you a guidance. So if you do not read Quran with this state of mind or with this assumption premise, what you read wouldn't make any sense. So try to read it to get a guidance, and if you cannot get a guidance, then complain. But do not read it as a geology, is it geology? A geology book. Read it to get guidance. And then in the next paragraph, he gives one example of reading Quran to receive guidance. And the author says, okay, since Quran talking about rocks and trying to attract our attention to the rocks, it is possible that it's just making some analogy or metaphor. But I guess the easiest way to test is just you go and observe the rocks and see what happens. An author was saying, when you look at the rocks, how they act or how they behave or what they do under the earth, you will see there's an order there. You will see that there's a submission there, as you were saying, Cosmo. And you will see many miraculous actions taking place there. Like this hard rock becoming very soft when they encounter these tiny rootlets. These tiny, powerless rootlets just cracking the rocks and finding their ways. And you will see the sustenance there. You will see how these plants are being sustained from something which is not even expected, from rocks or through rocks. So I guess that was one of the, at least reading of the paragraph. And then start this. Go ahead, please.
When you look at that example, that the very delicate roots of like the plants finds or like makes a way like in one of the substances that is like in terms of the hardness the most difficult, something the most difficult to break. So there, like you also realize that like it is not really about the plants, like that is not the capability of the plants, but somebody is actually actively making the way for them, right? And there, like in that scenario, you see his compassion and mercy. Even the rocks is like mostly you experience the manifestation of his power, but within that power, you see compassion and mercy prevails the how should I say, the name of power, if you like. So I think that's, in that sense, there is like a direct link to like since God is the most compassionate and the most merciful, and you see that in everything in the creation, even like in the example of the rocks and the roots relationship. And from there, like when you turn to yourself and your heart, do you have a heart, just like this is like I'm asking myself, do I have a heart that actually like opens, like it is a mirror for that kind of mercy and compassion that wants to manifest in this creation? do I open my heart to it? Does it like, is it like maybe, would that be one of the meanings that we are just so like how should I say, stiff in our own being, in our own heart towards the rest of the creation, whether it is animate beings, inanimate beings, or like living beings or human beings. On one hand, you experience the mercy and compassion of the Creator, but on the other hand, like you are just so stiff in your own heart that like you don't let that compassion and mercy manifest like through you or through your heart or in your heart.
It's again so interesting that Quran trying to teach us about the compassion of the Lord, and it is done through rocks and plants. Like through mentioning about the rocks and plants, what is given to you is the compassion of the sustainer, mercy of the sustainer. When you start thinking there's no end, like everything is so amazing. Everything about the creation is so amazing. Everything about, how this creation is being mentioned in Quran is so amazing. It's not, like the words like art or artistic, they don't make the justice. This is something else. We're talking about the rocks, and the point you reach is the compassion.
So like at the command of the Creator, a merciful Creator, rock becomes the most secure place for the living being. And do I really like open up my own heart for like that kind of compassion for other beings? Like, do I, most of the time, like when I ask myself, like, there's more hatred than anything else. I think like maybe that must be one of the things, I don't know, that must be one of the things that what that verse refers to in terms of like being hardened as hard as the rock, like the hearts being as hard as the rock. Otherwise, like I assume it shouldn't be a literal, like, because it is like a piece of flesh, right?
And I think rock is solid, so and it reminds me of materialism as well. So first of all, I have an ego which is so solid and doesn't want to lose its essence. It doesn't want to, I don't want to give any share to anybody. If my ego is hurt a little bit, I become so much of an enemy of the person that's trying to damage my ego. So this, it's untouchable and undamageable, so important for me.
And that may not be even the purpose of the individual actually in many cases, but we may be perceiving that way.
Yeah. So then this rock, and also related to, since it's in my personal life, it's my ego. In the outside world, it's the source of materialism. If you look at it, you can even take it to be the particle, atom. Because exploding the atom become the atomic bomb and everything, it became the source of like human showing power, became an important part of the power game, power struggles. And the basics of the materialist worldview. But now the Quran is saying that, and this is also, there's another verse alluding to the same thing, if the Quran was revealed to the mountain, you would see that the mountain is going to tremble and scramble because of fear of the Creator. And he says, you will see it in that verse. This is the end of Surah Al-Hashr. You will see that if the Quran is revealed to a mountain, it will just get crushed. If we ask this to ourselves, what does that mean? Do I ever see Quran being revealed to a mountain and this solid mountain just gets crushed? I guess the idea is, if I look at the mountain with the perspective of Wahi, I realize that there is no mountain, but it's nothing but the manifestation of God's names. But if I look at it from a materialist perspective, it's like matter sitting in there. But once Quran reveals on top of a mountain, in my perception, in my eyes, then it becomes nothing but light, meaning that the names of the Creator. Same thing should apply to my heart, which is another lump of stone. Quran should reveal to my heart, and my ego should dissolve, and I should say that there's nothing in me that exists in and of itself, but it is just a mirror. But I take it to be real. So this is why Quran is giving the examples from stones being exploding, meaning that the material that you rely most, in the outside world it's material, in the inside world it's your ego, you rely most, the stones are exploding all over the place. And this is not by chance. It is a manifestation of a will and power manifesting itself out there. Just pay attention. Once you realize that it's not by chance, you will see that then what's about the heart in here? Is it really a solid existence in my ego, which exists by itself, or it is just like a mirror, which is a sort of just reflection? There's no reality that I can touch. There's no tangible reality of my ego or anything that I say is mine from itself, in and of itself. So it should again dissolve. This is why Quran is in here by contrasting, saying that these stones, look at your own stone right now. It shouldn't be any different.
Asim, he was raising hand. Sorry, Asim. I couldn't give the mic to you before, but go ahead, please. And then I will read some comments, inshallah.
Thank you. No, you brought up like a very good point also about, the why is the verse comparing the heart of a human being to the rocks? I was thinking about that a little bit also, because in our, the way, I know you guys were mentioning, we don't really, get the amazement of looking at the things around. And that's what the latter part of the verse also says, that, look at the rocks, or when they are falling down, they're falling down from the awe of God. So there is a conscious source or some will that is actually, out of which they are, seems to tell me like they have some consciousness, and they are so obedient in that sense. And there you are, man, with all the things that you have, yet we do not, our hearts do not see or are not really get mesmerized with this honest or this amazing things that are happening around us. Yeah, just a small point I wanted to add.
Another point? Faraz, please go ahead.
Can you hear me, Birkan?
Oh, yes, we can.
Okay, yes. So this is very interesting. I just wanted to make a small comment about this, the heart in this verses, this one before and this one, and its comparison to the rocks. I guess the piece that we read, I got from it that it is, first, like a big chunk of it is, it felt one of the points was that, this mention of rocks is not something, if somebody were to raise the question that this is not befitting a scripture, and then, he's trying to say, well, this is a miraculous way of talking about it, and it is appropriate that this be mentioned this way, and then goes on to say what he understands. My only thing that after listening to some comments, I was thinking, the lifelessness is what I want to mention. The deadening of the heart, the hardening of the heart in a way that it becomes dead. so that it is not moved. It is not. It doesn't feel awe, because I think the end of the verse ends by mentioning how some of these rocks fall min khashyatillah, and this is. I was just thinking of the rocks, how they are mentioned, that how they are, the water gushing forth and cleft, and water comes out, and so there is the sense that when you look at rocks, they are part of this dynamic, almost living creation. They're not just they're not dead, in a way. It is like pointing to rocks that look very dead, but even they are employed or part of this existence. The way I experience them is that they are part of this dynamic activities going on, with the rocks breaking and water brought forth, and the rocks being made to fall and then made to. So they are part of this dynamism, the life, activity, action is going on, and perhaps in a sense saying that the rocks are registering this activity. They are, they are part of it. But the human heart, everything that is going around it, it can detach from it and become lifeless in a way, so that it doesn't register, doesn't feel it is part of this dynamic life force that is activity, maybe we can divine power that is acting. The human heart is part of that, and it is being acted upon, and it is, through it is brought forth different things, and so it's that lifelessness of not noticing how, because in the previous verse it seems that it says God saves lives from death and shows you his will so that you might use your reason. And it seems this seeing that from death, that there is a power that is bringing life from death, maybe, and if you don't notice that, then that is kind of like the lifelessness, the hardening of the heart, and the softening of the heart is to notice this, bringing of this activity of bringing of somebody bringing life from dead things, and that should make the heart full of life, or lively, and maybe ultimately we have khushu or khashya, this awareness of in connection with God. So I find that language more, I think, in line here. Like the deadness and the lively, the liveliness, and noticing and becoming aware. That sounds more to me work better than when we say about dissolving the ego, or using the ego and to dissolve the ego. That somehow I don't quite fully understand here in that way. That here it seems like to me the heart is not alive to the activity going on, and the way that rocks actually are. They are hard. They are part of this, and so the human heart is being asked to become aware of this activity which is going on around it and in it and on it, rather, of which it is a part. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Well, there is one comment from Jazakallah khair, by the way, Faraz, thank you. There is one comment from Amin. He says resistance appears to be a central point. Resistance appears to be a central point. I guess which brings us to the next paragraph, where author talks about the resistance as well, like explicitly. And this is also what I was planning to touch upon. So thank you, Amin.
Resistance to what?
In general, resistance is, he says, that what we should, discuss maybe. So how everything is submissive except human.
Resistance of human.
Yes, resistance of human, I guess. I'm just guessing from what Amin said. Amin says something, let me see. Resistance in general and how it applies to human heart. So he corrects me. Okay. In the next paragraph, which is also, I guess, related to what Farah said, like the author talks about actions of stones, actions of rocks, or actions taking place around rocks and stones, maybe would be a better way to say it, and how they submit to their duty, how they submit to their purpose. Like in the previous paragraph, that was the kind of the crux. And then in the next paragraph here, the author says, "O children of Israel and sons of Adam, what sort of heart do you bear within your weakness and impotence? What sort of heart do you bear within your weakness and impotence?" That's interesting. "So that with its hardness it resists the command of such a one." And then he continues with, how rocks carry out some delicate duties, how they show obedience, but on the contrary, human beings, the children of Israel and sons of Adam, or all human beings, I guess it was Yusuf pointing out maybe the last, like 2 weeks ago, maybe someone else, I'm sorry if I'm not right, saying that the author puts the sons of Adam as an extra, because in the previous verses, and I guess the verses coming after the verse that we study, it's all about the sons of Israel, like the children of Israel. But author puts here the sons of Adam. I'm just guessing to highlight or to emphasize that it's not about children of Israel, it's about all humanity. It's about you. So anyway, going back to the point that everything is so obedient, everything is so ready to follow their duties or fulfill their purpose. On the other hand, we see some resistance in the hearts of human, or in the hearts of human. The hearts of human does not aware of what's going on around, or doesn't, let's say, get excited, or as Faz was saying, get a death entity. So my question is, like when we use such a language, it suggests that there's a purpose that heart should serve. There's a duty that our heart should perform. But somehow we resist, or our heart resists. So what is the duty of heart? What is the purpose of heart? Or as rocks nourishing plants, how our heart is supposed to nourish us? Like these questions come to my mind. Because if we want to, like if we are talking about the resistance, we should be aware of a purpose, a duty. Or using the language used by others, how our heart become a living organ rather than a death organ, how it becomes a living organ. So what is the opposite of this resistance? That's my question. Not that I have an answer, but I'm just thinking a lot. So any attempt would be appreciated. Hatice Beyza says something. Oh, so, kind of comments that I like. It's a long one. Hatice says, there also seems to be a changing of the heart from its natural state by hardening. It takes on a new artificial death form. She says, there also seems to be a changing of the heart from its natural state to an artificial death form, and this takes place through hardening. Instead of going with the flow, she continues, the heart takes on a static form while the environment around it continues in a dynamic form, continuously in a dynamic form. So the heart, she says, stop going with the flow, in quotes, and takes a static form as opposed to everything around it, which has a dynamic form, urging it to take action as well. Urging it to take action as well. Until the last point, I was kind of clear, but I couldn't make the connection with the last point, that urging it to take action as well. So I would highly appreciate if you can elaborate the point, Hatice. But before that, Emin also says something. He says, what is heart resisting to? So that was my question as well. He says, and what does heart lose or gain by resisting, as opposed to demonstrating obedience like trees and water, etc.? So that's the question. Before we try to answer these questions, if you don't mind, Hatice, would you like to elaborate your point?
Sure. Thank you. I guess what I was trying to say is that I was thinking of the heart like a rock in a river, or like there's flowing water around it and it's just stable in one place. And, you know, through time, if the rock has sharp edges, it's like erosion, or I don't know what the exact terminology is called, but it smooths out, right? So I was thinking, you know, if I harden my own heart to a dead state of being, if I artificially do this, even all of the experiences, my environment, everything that happens to me or everything that I am feeling is urging me to become alive again, to return to the original state of my heart. And by this I mean that to become aware of my own nature, the own nature of my own heart, in that I have artificially transformed it to a form which is foreign to me, to become alive again. And kind of when I said going with the flow, it was a pun, but at the same time I meant with, you know, everything is dynamic in its creation, and by being mindful of myself and my own createdness, I can kind of try to partake in this orchestra, if you will. I don't know. So by urging it to take action as well, I meant that just, you know, kind of doing, what's that called when you like do the shock thing to the heart so it comes back to life, whatever, like kind of like bringing it back to life and then taking on a softer, smoother, original form again, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. I really like your analogy, the rock in a river, and how everything around you goes around.
Can I?
There is one comment from Faraz. Let me read, and then I will give it to you also. Faraz says, right. And what is it? Full stop. Okay. He says, right. Okay. Since now he explains why he said right and full stop. He says, just agreeing with Hatice. The staticness is the hardness as it resists seeing, witnessing, the living one through whose life giving it feel all the feelings and names that bring it joy and gratitude. Faraz, would you like to articulate it? Because I had a hard time to, sorry, probably it's my lack of,
No, it's, we are trying to all express something that is not easy to express, so it is not anybody's fault. What we want eventually is to, feel the force of this point, so I don't leave the discussion with a dead heart, so that's the only, it's just a common attempt in prayer we are making. So again, I'm not like thinking very technically about, hardness and softness, and I'm not looking for, any technical meaning, but just to kind of think about, the what Khadija Beza, I'm still, trying to process what she's saying. It makes sense that, it's ultimately it is, how should we say, the heart, what is the heart? Heart is, I think it's simply the name of, whether I am witness to, absolute life-giving activity, whether I am in it, whether the I, quote unquote, or I am seeing, sort of the heart is that witness, that because the awareness, the seed of awareness, which sees life-giving activity all around and in its own being itself, that consciousness is a form of life. It's like consciousness is life, and that to see that liveliness is as somebody's acting, as bringing a dead piece of muscle or a stone and making, manifesting on it. In our language we use, seeing it as receiving these manifestations right now of feeling, comprehension, understanding, awareness, love, joy. These are all, and receiving them and not seeing them as belonging to a dead thing. The thing is, like, when we look at ourselves, if I feel this way, I'm feeling this way now, I'm understanding what you're saying. And all of these things as if get attributed to a dead thing. And so they don't go anywhere. They don't open the heart to sort of a living presence of, and to a self-understanding of itself as employed in this process of life-giving, in this act of life-giving that is going on, and it itself is aware of somebody giving it this life, these potentials to feel and to see, and that in the way that the stones are mentioned, that they are employed in these things, and to think that the heart is also part of this life-giving activity, and it can become actually aware of it. And in a word, the verse saying, the rocks fall from khashiyatillah is really kind of saying, even though you think the rocks are not conscious, but I want you to think that this dead thing as if it was conscious, as if to really sort of to go back to the heart and say, what is required of this heart to be in this part of this living, it becomes aware. It has the potential to become aware of this absolute life coming into existence with all its different qualities. It is this part of this. So if the heart finds itself in that place, in awareness, that is what it is. It's really the heart of all consciousness, of all awareness, and the deadness of it is the hardness of it. To not register those is the hardness of it, and to realize the dynamic flow of life that is the creation of God coming and manifesting is the softness and is the living heart that registers that life-giving activity, and the dead heart that doesn't see it, see, So again, it is difficult to articulate concisely. It's a matter of trying to feel and get in touch with, the whatever we call the heart. What makes it dead or dead-like, and what makes it part of a living orchestra, as people are referring.
Thanks a lot. It makes much sense now. So I guess we have some keywords about this duty or the purpose of heart, or what it resists to. Life, consciousness, or being aware of things, or being aware of the life around, being aware of the consciousness around, and all these dynamic flow of consciousness around, taking around us, and so on. There is one comment from Amin, and then Osman, please take the lead. He throws another beautiful question. He says, what is exactly happening to us so bad when our hearts are hardened? So he asks, what is so bad with our hearts being hardened, so that such that our Creator decided to warn us in His Scripture. So what is the end result of a hardened heart that our Creator wanted to warn us against? Osman, please.
Yeah, I'm just gonna try to share my 2 cents. So if we are to put everything in perspective, with this, for this verse, so what does the heart represent? Obviously, when we talk about heart, I don't think we really necessarily mean the actual, the flesh itself. So what does heart represent in, for a human being? And also, why would Quran speak to man? You withdraw the attentions that Quran speaks to the sons of Adam, not just the children of Israel. So if Quran speaks to the primary purpose of the Quran is to establish Tawheed, and Quran speaks to man to establish Tawheed and belief, right? The oneness of the Creator and the belief. If that is the primary person, so within that context, what does this verse really mean to us? And the other question is, what does heart represent? If the heart is the seat of the belief, or in other words, I don't know the English, how the English translation would be, but there is this famous saying that the heart is the mirror of Samet. Heart kalp aynayı samettir.
What is Samet?
The besought one, like I think that's how they.
Samet. So the one who doesn't need anything, is that the meaning?
Everything needs him, yet he doesn't need
He
anything.
doesn't need it.
If anyone else could enlighten us. Okay, go ahead.
So, first, heart must be representing something or referring to something. Second, the belief takes place in the heart. So, heart is the seat for the belief in God. And the third, Quran speaks to man to establish tawhid and belief. So within that context, when I asked, like, what does it mean to me when my Creator speaks to me and telling me that your heart is being hard, that it is hardened, like rocks, even though rocks are like more softer than your heart, it should mean within that context. So like, I think that's why it is actually related to what Yusuf was trying to say, or at least what I understood from his comments, that if heart is the mirror for Samet, what I understand from that statement that God has unlimited manifestations and attributes of his like qualities or names in the creation, and there needs to be unlimited manifestation of those qualities in human being itself too. And where those manifestations are, I think is in the heart, which also sometimes like you refer them as emotions or feelings or whatever. So through those, like for example, we talked about mercy, love, or compassion. Brain doesn't feel that. Your heart feels those emotions. And only through those emotions you would like, one would really know what a compassionate, like who a compassionate is or what a compassion is. Without having that emotion being manifested in your heart, you just simply wouldn't know what it really means. So if that is the case, what all this has to do with like believing God, like, or heart being hardened. So like if you refer those things that you experience, if you refer to yourself, which in this case ego, like ego doesn't have such qualities, and taking that route is gonna only bring you to a point that like you will be just a human being who is actually blocking those manifestations. That is why you just become, how should I say, like I don't know the right terminology to use. You just limit yourself only to a few feelings only. For example, like I don't think like I would be feeling any kind of compassion for someone who is in need or impotent or who a needy one, if I like refer everything to myself, like saying that whatever I have is I gain with my own power, as opposed to like having the understanding that whatever you experience is nothing but a reflection, mere reflection of his names, and you have absolutely no like right to claim any kind of ownership over it. That is the only way that I can make sense of like, and referring to the rocks, heart, like being hardened, like roots, like being like able to penetrate into the rocks, like soften them. So you can only make, or I can only make sense when I put in that like context and refer to him, and also keeping in mind that like if Quran is a guidance, and if the primary purpose is to establish the belief, and in this specific context it is the heart that it's talking about, that what it should mean in practical terms. Otherwise, like everything we say is like becomes very we say a lot of stuff, but we don't say really anything. Because when I say that, okay, what does it really mean for heart to be hardened, or being lifeless, or being dead? Like, for example, when I say that, like, what is this? I'm holding a book in my hand, by the way. When I say a book, I can't like refer to this and saying that this is what I mean by book, right? And when I say like heart is hardened, okay, show me an external entity in the like experiential world that I can refer to and understand that, yeah, this is what it's referring to. Otherwise, we say a lot of stuff, but we don't really say anything because everything is just so vague that like I'm like, okay, like trying to relate the things that are being told, but like I can relate to some of them, but I can even, I have no really like no clue what exactly being referred to.
Maybe you should listen more carefully.
Maybe I should.
No, just kidding. What you said, again, it reminded me very end of this paragraph. But inshallah we will come to it. Before that, there's an explanation from Hatice. She thank you, Hatice. She, because I asked what this Samad means, she says, as Samad refers to one who is Lord, who possesses and disposes of all affairs, one whom people come to with their needs, but who at the same time is complete and self-sufficient, needing and depending upon no one else. Jazakallah khair. I knew that we could rely on you on that matter. So going back to text, argument, just continue with what you said. He says, see how like wax, those hard, unfeeling mighty rocks display a softness towards the creational comments, and how they offer no resistance or hardness to the delicate waters, the fine roots and silken veins, which are divine officials. As though like a lover, the rock's heart melts at the touch of those delicate, beautiful things and becomes earth in their path. So what you said, at least partly reminded me of this part, when you say the hearts melt or soften and let all these divine names goes through. Just reflect them.
Don't block them.
Don't block them, yeah. How these beautiful names goes through, yeah. I don't know, like to me there are all these different aspects, I guess different people trying to touch upon. But yes, I agree with as far as this intricate topic. It's really hard to follow. But inshallah we are doing our prayer.
Praying for.
So any other comments? Please.
Oh, sorry. I can't find the place where you read the sentence. Can you please read it again? I'm sorry.
Sure. It's just on my book is page 258. The paragraph starts with, O children of Israel and sons of Adam, what sort of heart do you bear within your weakness and impotence? This is the beginning of the paragraph, and I read the last a few sentences. See how like wax, those hard, unfeeling mighty rocks display a softness towards the creational comments, and how they offer no resistance or hardness to the delicate waters, the fine roots and silken veins, which are divine officials.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead, please.
No, I think there is a clue here because I think he describes softness, So from there we can try to get hardness. So for hardness he says resistance, and so for softness he says so unfeeling rocks display softness to softness towards the creational commands, right? So that is interesting. Softness to creational commands. What does this mean? So like you are saying, not blocking them and letting them come through. Yeah, that is happening in the rocks. So as a human being, it means it is already happening. So the likeness is already there, as it is happening in rocks, as also is happening in human heart. So what is the problem then? The problem is the rocks are not expected to be aware of this. A human being is expected to be aware of this, that this is happening. So, and for human being, it seems not being aware of this is a kind of hardness. So, so what Khadija Beze was earlier saying, the default is default is depending on who we're talking about. Default in terms of creational commands is that this is all creational commands happening. But default for human being, again, default, what do we mean by default? I guess one would say without taking Revelation's guidance seriously, that's what I mean by default here now, that as I am in the world, this is without any, this default is a heedless default. Maybe the Quranic verse, we found you misguided and we guide you. So being misguided is the default in the sense of heedless, hardened, which means not soft to creational commands. To me, it would mean for the human being not aware that what is indeed happening in reality is creational commands being carried out. And to be aware of this creational commands is the softness of the heart. So, when you say not block, that, so how maybe we can, say like, what would that mean to not block? What does that mean practically? What does it look like? What is it in the real world, as Usman was saying? What's in the experience? What that looks like, what refers to in my experience? And maybe one thing we could say that it means being aware every single moment of the creational commands, so that even now, as we are listening together, as we are existing here now, to become more and more aware that this is the result of a creational command through which my sustenance, my existence is being given, and all other qualities I am being made to experience, all a creational command. And so this would be, would be what it means to be a heart that is not a rock, that is soft to the creational commands, which may be to be aware that what is happening is not just that things exist, but they are being created. And I think just awareness of that creational command is a kind of softness. So that is interesting.
I guess discussion is going to very fine point, very fine direction that, I don't know, it gives a pleasure.
Yeah,
Every
I think we
moment,
start
yeah.
speaking the same language.
Sorry?
I think like we understand each other better now.
Abdurrahman, you were trying to say something maybe when Faraz was talking? Do you want to say something?
I wasn't saying.
Okay, sorry.
If you want me to say something, I can say something.
Please go ahead.
I think the thing I find most mind-blowing is just the perspective that he's looking at the rocks. Like he's not looking at the rocks as lifeless things. He's looking at them as if they're living, they're very conscious, and maybe they don't have free will like us. But you know, when a plant wants to go through it, these very powerful rocks, they allow it to go through it, and they make way for it. They act very kind to it. And as you were saying earlier, you know, this is the world we live in. Like it really amazes you. Like you have these very powerful rocks that, you know, they help these little plants, these little green things. They help them grow. And so when you look at it from that perspective, it's very beautiful. That's all.
Assalamualaikum. I joined a bit late, so I don't know if you guys. I'm not sure exactly where the discussion was heading. But you know, I took this verse, you know, having read like before having read it before, and you know, all these interpretations are really great. But I don't know if anybody ever took it. I don't know if anybody has mentioned it, but I took it for explaining, you know, as kind of, I heard what Osman was saying about some sort of tangible reality, but the different types of people, or the different types of people that I could possibly be. For example, you know, there are rocks from which streams gush forth as one type of people. Their hearts are, that's what their hearts are like. And then those that are which cleft, another type, and then those that fall down for awe of God, another type. And I could be all three possible types in that, you know, do I, you know, look towards the creator of the universe, one who is, as you guys mentioned, eternally beside or Samed, and do I, you know, appreciate him or sort of submit to the truth only because I'm in awe of his absoluteness? That's in one sense I took it. Or do I see it if, you know, after some time, rather than, you know, suddenly my heart breaks apart into two, which water gushes forth, from which there are cleft water issues, meaning, you know, suddenly I have some sort of experience in this world. For example, you know, maybe I lost like somebody I loved, and that was the moment where my heart was broken. And I then realized who the true source of life is, the life-giving one, and who I must show gratitude towards, and who is the only one who can give eternity to ones whom I love. Or then am I like a person, you know, from which streams, there are rocks from which streams gush forth, in that, you know, in one sense, you know, I don't simply just fall down in awe, or it doesn't necessarily take me some sort of, you know, earth-shattering experience, but am I an individual who, you know, allows for my heart to be softened by existence itself, or the things in the way in which things are made. For example, you know, I, you know, love something, but I immediately recognize that that is not really the object of love, the object of my affection, or I don't love the qualities for their own sake, but I attribute them to their source of existence, who must be the creator of the universe. And I kind of see that in all sort of aspects of the universe, all experiences in my life. And really the rock crumbles before the truth in one sense, just like it did for, the mountain crumbled in front of Moses. Because once exposed, or once, witness to it, there's nothing but for the heart to essentially crumble, or its outer hardened shell to crumble before his, absoluteness. So I that's kind of how I understood it. I'm not saying this is the only way, but I don't know if anybody felt this way or if you guys already discussed this.
As far as I remember, I might be missing, but no, we haven't discussed this, and I really like your interpretation, alhamdulillah. Beautiful.
Good conclusion.
Jazakallah khair. Any comments on that aspect or any other aspect of the verse? Okay, everybody seems to be satisfied so far. Inshallah, we expect such beautiful contributions from others as well, like Aisha Nur, Amin, Fariha, Suhaib, Suhaib, just spelled, sorry. Muhammad.
No pressure.
No pressure, of course, yes. There's also one, somebody's trying to hide there, Yusuf. Anyway, let's continue, inshallah. Any other points in this paragraph? I'm just skipping, not because, I think that we already exhausted it, but just because, I don't have anything to say. But if you want to say something, please go ahead. Awesome. I see you raising your hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, just since this paragraph also mentions in the first line, your heart is within your weakness and impotence. I thought that was also interesting. Like, basically, the heart is not realizing what kind of, the being that the human being is, in terms of knowing what it means to be who we are, so that weakness and impotence may not be really experienced, or may not be really seen or really thought of. And that's where I guess the harshness also, the hardness and the resistance is also stemming from. Because if we don't understand who we are as beings, then definitely I don't think that we will get to know who our source of existence is. But I really liked also what Suhail was saying in terms of how the different ways, in terms of the way the description of the rocks going through, and how the human state also can be in any of those ways. And I thought this was also part of that, the realizing what the weakness and impotence, how that plays also into that. Yeah, just to add that.
Oh, Suhail, please go ahead.
Just to, it kind of reminded me, what Asim said. I kind of, at least the way I thought about this verse previously, in a sense, each person is a kind of representation of, if you're familiar with, the Quran says, ilm al-yaqeen, ayn al-yaqeen, haqq al-yaqeen. And, the one who falls down for awe, or just sort of like, it's like, I appreciate like somebody who's really intelligent or really, athletic, but it almost like it doesn't really have an impact on me. And that's kind of like what I thought of ilm al-yaqeen. It's just knowing something doesn't really mean anything to me. And then those which are cleft water issues, ayn al-yaqeen, in that you have a vision of certainty, in that your experience of things kind of leads you towards that, but it takes those experiences to get you there. Like, you're not living in that, sort of present moment at all times, seeing how the Creator manifests His qualities. It just kind of strikes you sometimes, but it's not really the lens through which you view the world at all times. Whereas haqq al-yaqeen is like gushing forth, in that, like, you at all, and I'm not saying I do this, but like at all times, like, is your awareness, your consciousness, really your heart aware? It's if it's interesting, because if one were able to feel that way, they would really have a different perception of the world at every moment. For example, like in the moment, like you love something, you already know in your loving it that it can't satisfy you, that it's about to die or be transient or, pass away. It's just slipping through your fingers right there at that moment, rather than thinking about it, for example, sometime afterwards when the event happens. But you're so well aware of how existence is, and that these things don't satisfy your heart. And that's, to me, like haqq al-yaqeen, just having the knowledge, having certainty of just the truth of reality. So that's kind of how I try to make it, I guess we want to call it practical in one's life, in that how do I take what I experience in this world? What lens do I see it through? I mean, the highest being, am I really, really aware that God is not unmindful of what you do, in that he's so well aware of what happens at every moment that I'm well aware of that fact. Like, we're both, like, he must be aware of what's happening because he's the one that gives it existence. And then likewise, reciprocally, am I aware of it? That, like, is my heart so well aware of the world to that extent that I'm always in his presence? Or am I just like kind of caring about my day-to-day affairs without even thinking about it?
There's one question from Amin. It's in a comment form, but I guess it's a question. He says, I am still unclear on how to soften my heart, or how it looks like in my daily life. I'm still unclear on how to soften my heart. Like, what I understood, I will just try to reiterate what others said, at least the way I understood. I guess one aspect is being aware of creativeness. That's what I remember. And also, as Hatice was saying, being aware of this dynamism around you, which is also mentioned as life-giving action taking place around you. Like, you see things, you look at things, and you see how life is constantly given to the things. Even when you look at the rocks, you see how life is given through rocks to the plants. Or as he's mentioning in coming paragraphs, you see rocks coming down from the mountains, mixing with the earth and becoming a nutrition for plants. So all these life-giving actions taking place around you. You watch the rain coming down and you see life there. So you become aware, you become conscious of life surrounding you and how it comes from the source of life, like the life-giving, life-giver, being connected with the life-giver.
Maybe just this is as an answer to Amy's question. So, like, see everything around you, see the divine disposal, and relate that, like, to your own, like, self as well, your own being as well, and your own emotions as well, and knowing that whatever you are experiencing is not out of that divine disposal. There is a true owner, there is a true maker or like sustainer of those experiences, and just giving those experiences to its rightful owner.
I guess this is maybe what Yusuf was saying at the very beginning.
I
Not
think that's what he was
attributing to.
alluding to, as far as I understood.
So I will take you guys back to Faraz's presentation on the retreat, since most of us was there. And also the same chapter, he was talking about Surah Al-Asr. It's also being studied on Wednesday discussions. So if anybody is following it, I'll just give a brief background. So the chapter starts with Wal-Asr, and while this was being interpreted in both discussions by Faraz and by Brother Ali, so by the time, it was as if the time is this continuous change. So the Creator in that verse, in that chapter, was swearing by the time. So this ongoing, never stopping manifestation is being, my attention is being attracted to that. Just pay attention to this ongoing change, ongoing activity. In the insan lafi khusrin, so the human is at loss. For as widely talked about that, he might correct me if I'm wrong. So in there, the main emphasis of Faraz's discussion, as far as I remember, was
He's still referring to retreat, by the way.
yeah, disowning the properties. This was the crux of his presentation, as far as I remember. So I feel like I have something because I am ignoring the fact that the asr, the time, is an ongoing action that is being done independent of me. Somebody keeps creating. So
You are subjected to that change as well, like
Yes.
activity as well.
whatever is being seen on me is being put on me. So it's not me having that. So
Independent of you.
yeah, so it's not mine. So even if rhetorically I say that my memory, my intellect, my this, my that, none of them are truly mine. They are just, I am being manifest. So using the word in here, I am being a disposal of divine names. So realizing this, using Faraz's terminology there to maybe partially address Emil's question again, I should be disowning myself, disowning the qualities that are manifest on me. So initially, I was trying to say this by dissolving. This is what I was trying to say, because otherwise I'm feeling like I'm this rock and the qualities belong to me, but once it dissolves, all of them becomes divine names. Once they were on me, they are disconnected from the source and they're like a rock, I say it's mine. But once it shatters, all them become bits and pieces, metaphorically speaking, of divine names. So they dissolve, rock becomes nur. So the hard rock, nur in here, since the Creator is saying that all divine names are like light. So then those rock dissolves and becomes light, which is the divine names.
Which also, I guess, nicely ties to, goes back to the very first sentence that Asim highlighted. What happened to your heart within your weakness and impotence? I might be misreading it, but the way I understand, like, although you have this weakness and impotence, which is a great tool to reach the reality, why don't you see it? Like, you have this weakness and impotence, use it, follow it, and as you were saying, start disowning the qualities.
But in another verse, like once you have that realization, that like consciousness, that you don't own them at the first place, and you just like ascribe them to this true owner, like for as far as you are concerned, there is nothing for you to challenge, like yourself and challenge anybody in that sense. And as a result of that, like realization or acknowledgement, like that brings you to a point that like you understand your own place, and it brings you to the point that like you are humble enough just to say that this is my reality, just like conforming with your own reality and submitting to it. Which that's why I think at the beginning when I said that it sounds like there is submission in this all like events it's talking about. So you just like submit to your own, conforming with your own reality and just leave it at there.
One comment from Faraz, it's a personal one. He says, thanks, Yusuf. Now I understand what you meant by dissolving. I initially didn't get it correctly, he says. I just want to highlight this life part. I think it's really important. Like, when we look around, we see, as Abdurrahman was saying, we see nothing but life. Even within the rocks, even under the earth, above the earth, doesn't matter. Everywhere you look, life is there. And life brings mind to the consciousness. So the consciousness is there. We constantly interact with the consciousness, conscious beings. So I guess this is really important. Yes, dissolving things there, like what's taking place in the heart, or being aware of createdness, it's there. But also what is around us, and also within us, is life. All these actions taking place around us which bring life, or which reminds us life, which is the most precious element of ourselves as well. I guess we shouldn't forget this. Like life, it's so nice, so delicate.
That also, like, you don't have to discuss it, and this is just a small comment on the site. That also brings something to man's life, that through the softened heart, that becomes your personal telephone to communicate with your creator. In other words, God speaks to man, every single individual, through his or her heart. And that, I think that only like becomes real once, you want to call it soften or live or whatever you want to name it, once that consciousness, that realization takes place or occurs. So then you start like having a direct line with your creator. So you speak to him through your heart. But whatever that means, like, everyone should take it with a grain of salt. So I don't want to start a controversial debate.
Okay, we have around 5-6 minutes, and Suhail wants to speak, which is great because he's the right person to end the discussion. So go ahead, please, Suhail. Take your time.
I don't know if I'm the right person, but I want to, Osman said controversial. Well, I think it's probably, at least, having studied Norsi for so long with you all, and, Dr. Ali, I've personally come to the conclusion that, as Osman said, without the heart, what are we really talking about, honestly? I mean, you can have some sort of, I guess, if you want to call it quote unquote intellectual or, logical discussion about reality, but it kind of ends there. It doesn't go anywhere. I'm not saying it's not necessary, but it's not important. It's in a sense kind of the foundation, but it doesn't, in and of itself, it just doesn't take you anywhere. And you can't really communicate through that. Like, if I think about, people I communicate with, or people you have a relationship with, or you don't really communicate with them on some sort of like a real relationship, like where you want to see the person or talk to them. Like you don't want to talk to them because necessarily it's just for out of the intellect, just for that purpose. But you in a sense, like you have an emotional connection, like you love to hear them speak, or you love their presence. That really goes kind of beyond that sort of sense. And I agree with Osman. It's like the heart in that sense is a sort of personal connection with your creator, because through that you really, at least the way I see it, you really begin to appreciate the sort of, or at least have awe of his names, like awe of his qualities, and you really begin to be cleft apart and crumble because of it. Or as Birkan says, I don't know how you don't cry, or if you're like in a moment where it strikes you that significantly, how you don't sort of at least shed a tear. And I think that's the way I think you have a sort of you have a personal connection with your creator. Otherwise, it doesn't. I don't know if it really means anything. It's just something It doesn't go anywhere.
سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. الفاتحة.